those high standards. I want Britain to have high standards, and therefore, as long as we commit to those high standards, then reaching agreement that reduces the friction isn't as hard as...
Take the next right onto Causeway A312.
It's got to be a bespoke agreement, but other countries have done it. New Zealand has done it, Canada has done it, and I believe we can do it as well.
Continue on A312 for 1 mile.
To go. I've been watching you and listening to you very carefully, of course, in the chamber, and for several weeks now you have been targeting your fire very, very carefully and heavily on Rishi Sunak, as if you think that he is the person you will end up fighting. Meanwhile, looming behind you is Penny Mordaunt. Do you think you may have been firing your salvos in the wrong direction?
Well, Andrew, at the last PMQs on Wednesday, I was firing at all of the then 8 candidates, obviously reduced in number by now. And so we had very odd PMQs in a way, because Johnson is obviously finished, he's a goner now, and I was aiming at the other candidates. And I don't actually mind which one of them wins it, because I don't think that it's possible for the Conservative Party to get us out of the mess that they've got us into in the last 12 years. We've had 12 years of stagnation, 12 years of low growth, and we're stuck with worse inflation and lower growth than pretty well any other country. And so I don't think changing the person at the top of the Tory party is the change that we need. We need something much more fundamental than that. We need a fresh start for Britain. We need a change of government. And my message in the chamber, when I was in Gateshead on Monday, and here when I'm talking to senior leaders in Germany, is that the Labour Party has changed in the last 2 years. We are ready for an election. We are ready to win that election, and we're ready to govern. And that's the change that we need, that fresh start for Britain.
You may well end up facing Penny Mordaunt, and many of your colleagues think that she would be a formidable foe. So what do you think about Penny Mordaunt?
Look, Andrew, I don't mind who I face. And, you know, I remember when I started as leader of the Labour Party... Well, I mean, I haven't shadowed her or anything, and a number of our team have shadowed her, but I haven't shadowed her. But obviously, I've been watching carefully everything that all the candidates have said. But for me, I really don't mind who I go up against. And, you know, there are plenty of people that told me back in April 2020 that, Keir, they said, you know, good luck, but there's no way the Labour Party can get from where it landed in 2019 into a position to win the next general election. We proved them wrong by making real progress this year in the local elections and in the Wakefield by-election. So now people are challenging me to say, well, aren't you going to win by even more than it looks as you are at the moment? People said to me, do you remember, Andrew, they said to me, well, Keir's all very well in the chamber when it's COVID and there's nobody there, but how's he going to cope with Johnson when the chamber's full? And I had all of that. And then, you know, we proved them wrong, and it'll be the same with the next Tory leader. Bring it on. I don't mind who it is, but I'm absolutely clear. The change we need is not the change at the top of the Tory party. They're the problem. They're not the solution.
I completely understand why you say that, and yet it may be a mistake, because the Conservatives are the most successful party historically in Western Europe for a reason. And one of the reasons is that they regenerate in power. They change the leadership in power. And you may say it's just prestidigitation, they're all the same Tories, but actually to the public it does look different. And it seems to me it's a little bit like Doctor Who, you know, you think it's David Tennant or it's Peter Capaldi or Jodie Whittaker, and then there's a new doctor. The doctor keeps, it's always Doctor Who, but it's always a new doctor. And the danger, what you don't want to do is end up as the Daleks.
Yeah, but Andrew, there's a different, you know, this has a different feel to it, because the economy is so broken. For me, and I would say as a football fan, this feels like a team that's sinking, you know, lower and lower in the relegation zone and is desperately trying to change its manager in the hope that they can turn things around. There's a desperation about this. This will be the 4th Prime Minister in a 12-year period of failure. And I really, I look forward to the general election. If they're confident that they can remake themselves in this successful way, then go to the country. Let's test that, because we have turned our party around in the last 2 years. We're a different, changed Labour Party, and we're ready. So anybody who wants to call election, whichever the candidate it is, do it. Please do, so we can take our positive case to the country and bring about the change that we really want.
You've spoken recently rather warmly about Tony Blair, and you say you're talking to him and he's given you some advice. What advice has he given you?
Well, look, I've been talking to Tony for some considerable period.
In 200 yards, at Wagoners roundabout, take the second exit onto the Parkway, A312.
Had with them until recently has been about that period, 94 to 97. How does a party in opposition get itself ready for government? What's the pace of change, etc.? And I'm very, I'm well aware that we don't want to rerun 1997. So much has moved on. We've got to face the world as it now is. So I don't want to go back and run the same project, the same programme. But I'm very interested in this question as to how a party gets ready for power. Because, Andrew, my job really was to lead the Labour Party and do two things in one run, which was to change the Labour Party in opposition and prepare for power from opposition all in one go. And previously the Labour Party has taken a long time to do those two bits.
And people say you've had to be Neil Kinnock and Tony Blair and do it all in the space of a few years. But there are lots of people on the left of the party who feel that you have welched, if I can use that word appropriately, on the commitments you gave when you were standing as leader. So can I just test a couple of them with you? Can I ask...
Exit the roundabout onto the Parkway.
Common ownership of rail mail...
Continue on the Parkway for 1 mile.
Andrew, I'm pragmatic about this, not ideological. But we've got to face the reality of the situation, which is post-COVID. Our economy is in a different position. But I'm not one of these people who's ideological about it. It must be one thing or the other. We've got to be practical.
So things have changed.
Well, we're going to inherit a very broken economy.
And what about the pledge that you'll end all private provision in the NHS? Is that still operative?
Well, look, there is some private provision in the NHS, and we're likely to have to continue with that. But I actually do believe strongly in the NHS as a public service. Well, Andrew, I'm not going to resile from my belief in the NHS as a public health provider. My wife worked in the NHS, my mum worked in the NHS, my sister worked in the NHS. It runs through our blood.
That was a very specific pledge, however, which has now gone. One more. You say that you would work shoulder to shoulder with the trade unions to stand up for working people. That will get a hollow laugh from the RMT today.
Well, Andrew, we have, with our unions, crafted a green paper...
In a quarter of a mile, at Cranford Parkway interchange, take the second exit onto the M4 slip road to Heathrow Airport, M25.
Which is stronger than anything we've seen in this country, and all of our trade unions helped us with that. So that pledge, that draft legislation is very much the product of that pledge, Andrew. But I mean, I would say this.
Okay, to be
Andrew,
absolutely
just about those pledges. We had just because you put the pledges to me. We went through the hustings that all of the candidates, Tory candidates, are going through now, and everybody at every hustings had a closing speech, and my closing speech was the same every single time, which was, if we don't win, all the things that all the candidates are saying will never come to pass. So I made it clear that anyone voting for me as leader of the Labour Party would have someone who is laser-like focused on winning an election. And that was my pitch to our Labour Party members. And by the way, if you look at our votes in conference last year and the support we're getting, the idea that the vast majority of Labour members aren't very happy that we've turned our party around, that we're now, I'm getting challenged on what we're going to do as an incoming Labour government. That's unbelievable compared with where we were 2 years ago. So this impression that Labour Party members aren't pleased with the direction of travel is, I'm afraid, just wrong.
Let me ask you about two other big issues.
Exit the roundabout onto the slip road.
House of Lords, because at the last election the Labour Party was
In a quarter of a mile, merge onto M4.
stuffed with Tory donors and all sorts of characters. I can't believe for a second you yourself like the look of it. Are you open to actually abolishing it and replacing with some kind of elected chamber of the regions and nations or something else?
Yeah, I think there's got to be reform, and I've, as you may know, asked Gordon Brown to head up a commission on the future of the United Kingdom, which he is doing at the moment. And amongst the things he's looking at is reform of the House of Lords. But it's a much bigger review than that, Andrew, because what really drives me, what I'm so interested in, is this question of how we grow our economy to raise living standards, but do it in a way that ensures that every place in the United Kingdom can contribute to that growth and take the reward from that growth. And so
Yes.
I've also asked Gordon to look at what you might call economic devolution, which is how do we get every place to be able to make that contribution to our economy and together. Yeah, more power to the regions, economic hubs and clusters across the United Kingdom, so that London, the South East, obviously, carries a heavy part of our economy. I want that to be across the whole of the country. Gordon Brown is looking at that. Of course, House of Lords reform is in there, but what motivates me is the question of how do I ensure that in Burnley and in Hull, in Blackpool, in those places, we can raise living standards, match the ambitions of local people, and create a situation where every young person doesn't feel they've got to leave the place they live in order to get on.
Do you have an open mind about reform of the voting system, or is it completely off the table?
Well, there's a very big argument in our party about different electoral systems. I'm clear we're going to have to go with the electoral system we got into the election, and therefore
For this election,
I'm focused
for sure.
on winning on the first past the post system.
Of course, but after that, it's a lively issue. You talked about conference. Lots of motions are coming to your conference on this subject. And I just want to know whether you personally are open to the idea in the longer term of changing the voting system. You personally.
Well, Andrew, it's not a priority for me. It's not a priority for me. An incoming Labour government's going to have its work cut out, and I've made clear that my three priorities are going to be growing the economy, rebuilding our public services and uniting our country, and that is going to be the focus of what we do in the next Labour government. We're going to have to prioritise, and those are the priorities.
I know you have to go, but you can give me a one-answer question to this. Are there any circumstances in which you would do a deal with the SNP?
No, absolutely not.
In half a mile, keep right to stay on M4.
Chance just to expand on that. No deal into the election, no deal out. And I'll tell you why. Because there is no basis for an alliance. I want to be the Prime Minister for the whole of the United Kingdom. I want a Labour government for the whole of the United Kingdom. There's no basis for an alliance.
Keep right to stay on M4.
Break up the United Kingdom. And if I take my central mission, which is to grow the economy, it is impossible to have an alliance with a party whose only answer to growing the economy is to put a border between England and Scotland. So this isn't just a numbers game. It is an absolute matter of principle that the Labour Party, which believes in the United Kingdom and the future of the United Kingdom, and wants to make that positive case for the future of the United Kingdom, cannot do a deal with a party whose central aim is to break up the United Kingdom. So it's a very strong and emphatic no, not just because of the numbers, but as a matter of principle.
A crystal clear, emphatic and very important answer. Keir Starmer, thanks so much for talking to me. I do hope we can talk again soon. Thank you for that, and good luck in Berlin, if I can say that. Joining me now to react to that interview with the Labour leader Keir Starmer, as well as the ongoing Conservative leadership contest, is Kate Devlin, who's Whitehall editor of The Independent, and Steve Richards, writer and broadcaster, and author of The Prime Ministers We Never Had. Kate, let me just start with you. Really interesting, I thought. I mean, there are two areas of Conservative attack that Keir Starmer is going to face, I guess, over the next 2 years, whoever is Tory leader. And one is that he's going to do a deal with the Lib Dems and rip up our great constitutional system. And on that, he was much less emphatic about whether or not he might look at some form of electoral reform. It's not a priority, he said, but he didn't say he was against it. And so I think a lot of people will be reading things into that. But on the SNP, this so-called coalition of chaos, I haven't heard him so clear and so emphatic as he was just now.
I agree with you, and I think that is going to be quite a serious line of attack. We heard it even today at Liz Truss's launch. She was talking about...
in half a mile, keep right to stay on M4.
Keir Starmer. So I thought that was quite interesting. I think, to be honest, his answer on the SNP, I can see why they say that, like that, but you know as well as I do, if it comes down to incredibly small numbers, and we have a hung parliament and they are relying...
Keep right to stay on M4.
Their argument is that they're going to shame the SNP into voting with them, because how could the SNP ever vote with the nasty Conservatives? That may not hold up enough, and they might have to find something around allowing democracy to take place, to allow something to happen at Scotland.
I would be very surprised if they did. Steve Richards, on that same point, what Keir Starmer is saying about the SNP and his openness via Gordon Brown to constitutional change south of the border. Just give us your views.
Well, on the SNP, he has no choice but to be absolutely emphatic and not leave any possible gap which can be exploited by his opponents to suggest anything else than that he won't do some kind of deal. And I think he's wise to make that crystal clear now, not during an election campaign. What happens in a hung parliament afterwards? Well, clearly, when you're so clear, you can't then go to some form of arrangement with them, and you will have to busk it. In the wider constitutional arena, it is over to Gordon Brown. Keir Starmer has faith in Gordon Brown on quite a lot of things. Economic policy, I gather he speaks to Gordon Brown as well as Tony Blair. And on this thorny issue of how you reconfigure the UK in a way that might reassure some people currently wanting independence in Scotland to go back to Labour, I think it's at the moment in Gordon Brown's hands as to what happens.
And I don't know if you were able to hear the part of the interview where we went through his original pledges when he was standing to be leader of the Labour Party, and one by one he's really torn them up, and the left are incandescent with rage about this and say it's hypocrisy and it's many bad things. But it appears to me that in realpolitik at the moment, having got through the problem with Durham and having had some good numbers coming and having helped get rid of Boris Johnson, he feels that his authority is such that he does not really need to worry about that very much.
No, but I mean, it is an issue, and you illustrated precisely what it is. I mean, you quote these pledges, which incidentally, people I've spoken to think he didn't have to make. He would have still won that leadership contest without those pledges.
In 2 miles, at junction 6, take the A355 exit to Slough Central.
A few years on, and there's a limit to how you could say the pandemic has changed everything. However, I think the actual position is a bit subtler than that. I mean, I think there will be radical elements in Labour's programme. You see, when he says economic growth is going to be his great theme, well, who's against that? But what are the mechanisms which drive it? How are you going to use government in a way? And in that, I think they will be a bit more radical than appears to be the case at the moment. But I think you were right to raise those pledges, and he has to address the fact that he's changed so much in relation to those.
Okay, let me turn back to the other story of the day, of course, which is the Conservative leadership second round. We lose Suella Braverman, but there are 5 left in there, still quite a diverse, and they're all relatively bunched. I mean, I know that Rishi is ahead, but everybody's around there, and it's still possible, is it not, that we'll end up seeing Penny Mordaunt versus Liz Truss as the final 2. How do you read the race at the moment? I know it's very difficult. It's like watching the Grand National taking snaps.
I agree with you. It is very bunched, and it's much more bunched than Rishi Sunak's supporters would have wanted and would have expected 48 hours ago. And they are emphasising to people who might want to get into the Rishi camp that they really do have to do that it's not just a given that he's going to be in the final 2 anymore. And if you want to see him in there, you're going to have to...
In a quarter of a mile, at junction 6, take the A355 exit to Slough Central.
Reported, I think it's in the Times tomorrow, was saying that Andrea Leadsom has already been chosen. If Penny Mordaunt wins as the Chancellor of the Exchequer, the first female Chancellor of the Exchequer we would ever have had. Another Tory first.
Exit at junction 6.
As a female, I'm afraid I take a rather contrary view, and I don't think that these things should actually be seen as good news stories. They are actually bad news stories, that this would be the first time that we would have a...
In a quarter of a mile, at the roundabout, take the third exit onto Tons Lane A355.
But yes, it would be historic, and again, it would be
To be clear,
something for the
it should have happened before. Not that
we all agree on
we
that.
should keep them a note to the Treasury.
We do all agree that, and it would be bad. It's bad for Labour. This whole thing is bad for Labour, that they're so far behind on these issues.
Steve Richards, you wrote a book on the Prime Ministers we never had. You're going to have a very big addendum to that book, a final chapter, I think, after all of this. But I thought, we've lost Suella Braverman. We probably never thought that she'd be in the final group, but we still have a really, really interesting fight, probably between Rishi Sunak and Penny Mordaunt. Liz Truss in there somewhere, but we're not quite sure where.
Yeah, well, one of the themes of the book is most chancellors are seen as likely next prime ministers and then don't get it. You know, Ken Clarke.
Bleak news for Rishi tonight.
Yeah, and it's
a message from history.
It's for the reason that Rishi Sunak is behind in these members' polls, that chancellors have to take unpopular decisions that members don't like, and then they turn against them. They like them when they do popular things, and then really turn, as you know, let's say Healy and others discovered.
Exit the roundabout onto Tons Lane.
Popular at the moment a contest begins. And I think we're going through this again. It's not a prediction that Rishi Sunak won't make it, but if he doesn't, it will be another chapter in this book where a chancellor fails.
A chill message from...
In a quarter of a mile, slight left towards Sippenham Lane.
Steve and Kate Devlin of The Independent, thank you both very much indeed. Coming up at 10 tonight, it's Nick Abbott. But right now on LBC, it is Ian Dale. Thanks for that, both.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This
Slight left towards Sippenham Lane.
From Global's newsroom at 7 o'clock, 5 candidates remain following a second ballot of Tory MPs in the Conservative leadership contest to replace Boris Johnson. Attorney General Suella Braverman has been knocked out of the race after receiving the fewest votes. Rishi Sunak came out on top, but Penny Mordaunt made the greatest gains. Nicola Sturgeon earlier released the second document in what she's called her prospectus for Scottish independence. Conservative MP Nigel Huddleston is backing Rishi Sunak and has told our
Continue for 1.5 miles.
keep the union together by defeating Labour.
Keir will be more worried about Rishi than anybody else because he knows in the country his biggest threat is Rishi Sunak, because he's the best chance of the Conservatives winning the next election and therefore making sure that the union stays together. And I think that's really important. So one of Rishi's key points is, if you want the union to stay together, vote for him, because he has got the better chance of winning the next election.
Labour has rejected claims it could strike a deal with the SNP, making way for independence. Sir Keir Starmer has told Tonight with Andrew Marr he's happy for any of the Tory candidates to win.
I don't actually mind which one of them wins it, because I don't think that it's possible for the Conservative Party to get us out of the mess that they've got us into in the last 12 years. We've had 12 years of stagnation, 12 years of low growth, and we're stuck with worse inflation and lower growth than pretty well any other country.
Train drivers at 8 rail companies will stage a 24-hour strike later this month in a row over pay. Members of the ASLEF union at operators including Great Western, Hull Trains and South Eastern will walk out on Saturday the 30th of July. Yesterday, the RMT union announced its members will strike again on the 27th in a dispute over pay and jobs. Kevin Spacey will go on trial in the UK next June, charged with 5 counts of sexual assault. The Oscar award-winning actor has denied the charges, which relate to 3 men and date back 17 years. Heathrow has accused Emirates of putting profit above passenger safety by rejecting its cap on numbers. On Tuesday, the airport said a limit of 100,000 people would be able to depart until the 11th of September, but Emirates has accused it of showing blatant disregard for consumers. Patrick Edmond is the managing managing director of Altair Advisory, which provides strategic advice for the aviation industry. He's told LBC Emirates won't be alone in its frustration.
Emirates has a particular strength in this case because they have been flying to Heathrow for many years. They have 6 A380 flights coming in every day, so they are a huge player, and they have the wherewithal to make their presence felt. So I think Emirates is perhaps leading the way here, but I think there will be many others cheering behind the scenes.
And the government says it's preparing for a surge in demand on the NHS ahead of possible extreme temperatures next week. An amber heat warning will be in place for much of England and Wales from Sunday until the end of Tuesday. Forecasters believe temperatures could reach 35 degrees Celsius in southern, central and eastern parts of England. Dr. Catherine Henderson is president of the Royal College of Emergency Medicine. She's told LBC they're stretched.
We cannot guarantee that an ambulance is going to get to somebody in a timely way. In the way in the past, we used to have waiting list problems, we used to have crowding in emergency departments, but we're now at a state where things are so bad that that very simple thing of guaranteeing to people that an ambulance will come when they expect it to come, we can't guarantee that that's going to happen.
In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed down 116 points at 70.39. The pound buys $1.18 and €1.18. LBC weather, clear spells for most tonight. Some showers for northern areas in the early hours, lows of 11. Showers moving south tomorrow, staying dry in the far south, very warm in the southeast, a high of 25 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Amelia Cox.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Ian Dale.
Hello, very good evening. Just turn my glasses off there. Welcome to the programme. It's 4 minutes past 7 on LBC. Now, tonight, in the first hour of the programme, we're going to conduct our 4th and 5th Conservative leadership interviews with Tom Tugendhat and Kemi Badenoch. We haven't had replies from Rishi Sunak or Liz Truss, so we may get them next week, but I suspect not. Coming up a little bit later, we're going to be talking more about Liz Truss. We talked a lot about Rishi Sunak and Penny Mordaunt this week, but at 8 o'clock, we're going to get your reaction to the 2 interviews that I'm about to do, and also talk a little bit about Liz Truss's campaign as well. And we'll be talking to the Ukrainian MP, Alexei Goncharov.